So this video is actually the original video that I wanted to make. This video is going to be about the prototyping of the lamp, and I think the other videos are sort of build up to contextualize this a little bit more. But so this is going to take you through the whole prototyping, and I've got my screen here. I'm going to screen share a slideshow presentation and talk through it. So I'll have some audio of me talking, but the main thing will be this, this screen share. And so let's get into it. Yeah, prototyping an oil lamp. So some of you might have listened to the first videos, but one of my initial points of inspiration was, this flame in an oil field. I always sort of, like this flame at the top of a stick. It seemed like, quite unnatural. And, in this barren land and this flame sort of blaring, somehow captivated me a bit. So that was, one thing that I liked. And another part of inspiration was when I was working in a bar, and the candle here would burn all over wax all over the table, and then I'd have to scratch it off at night, and that annoyed me. So then I made this little or found this little plate to stop the wax. And at that point I sort of thought a bit about oil lamps, and whether they would be suitable for an environment with, people or kids. Then sort of that idea just sort of stayed around in my mind for a little while. And at some point I sort of came up with this idea of a constant level lamp, that this is just made out of some slices of steel with a seal that I've put in there. And basically the way that this works is, this here is the ram. There's some seals here, and this tube goes all the way through to where the oil is. And as gravity pushes the ram down, the oil gets fed up the tube. And because gravity is constant and this weight's constant, it'll push throughout the whole sort of journey of the bottle. It'll push to a constant level here the whole time. So that was the idea that sort of got me started. So I thought, let's buy a cheap old big lathe, and let's get the power into my cellar through my kitchen, and then down into the, through the chimney, the old unused chimney chute, and then into the cellar. So I had here 3-phase power in my cellar. Obviously I had done zero machining before, and I stuck the the bar a whole long way out. But I managed to be able to make some nice rams, which was good. So that was a start. And this was the aesthetic that I was sort of going for, this light at the top of the stick. And you can see this clear one here is that's like a paraffin oil, and this here is olive oil, and it's darker. So I was already, playing with this idea of olive oil, to start with, or, right at the start. One tricky thing with this design was being able to see where the oil actually was in the tube. Trying to measure that was quite a difficult thing. So I, over here, this... these are two separate tubes, and you could pull the tube sort of out, and to adjust exactly how high how high the wick is in relation to the oil. into the oil level. But I'm already having problems, and I'm making like little plates. It was sort of overflowing a bit, so I made these little plates to hopefully catch the oil with the surface tension of the plate, and hoping that the wick would then get a bit more fuel and burn it off, and it would sort of like balance itself out. But yeah, so this little guy. He comes around this time. We move, and this is my new cellar and new workshop and new secondhand lathe. But this distance here is like 1 meter or something. This is like half a meter, and I'd have a chair and I'd just sort of roll back and forth here. But it was actually quite nice to work there. It was just like one direction of rolling. Yeah, so one idea to try and create a better, more efficient burn was to make a valve that would only allow a certain amount of oil through. For example, you can see that this part is mounted into the ram, and this part is the tube, and you can screw it in, and it locks off. But it doesn't stop the fact that the biggest problem that I was having was the walls of this glass were sort of at the bottom sometimes bigger than they were at the top, or the other way around. But in any case, the resistance of this seal would change throughout the travel of the ram, and that would cause more or less resistance, and it would push oil over the top. So obviously if there's less resistance, you're going to get more pressure, so the valve isn't really going to work. The valve's only going to work in the way that I wanted if the pressure was constant, but that's the problem to start with. So it was just a bit of a silly idea. I attempt to make some sort of buffer zones, with a little bit more, surface area and diameter at the top. That would sort of be a bit of a catchment area that I wouldn't so quickly spill over the top. But that didn't work too much. And one of the issues that I was having was that this ram would get sort of cocked in the glass, so it wouldn't slide straight down. So I had to then start machining little lids to make sure that this stayed completely vertical throughout the travel. Things sort of started working, so I decided to make a whole bunch of lamps, 10 or something. But I had to measure each of them because the diameters were quite different, so I had to sort of custom make each part. And for example, you can see here, this is like the diameter is like 61. This is like this diameter here is like 61 millimeters, and this one here is like 62.3. So you've got like changes between them, but also on the same on the same glass, you've got nearly like a millimeter difference throughout the whole range of the glass. So that was like really difficult to work with, and I looked far and wide for better glasses and more accurate glasses, but they're actually quite good for what they were. But it was impossible to find something better, but I sort of persevered. I got a little bit better at machining, and I was actually here fixing my cutter into the lathe tool bit holder, and cutting like precise O-rings, and it was really sort of like a tenth of a mil was sort of some of these tolerances and it would make a difference. So it was getting pretty fiddly. So yeah, I mean, this one sort of was working nicely, so I took some nice photos, and bought some little letters to stamp, and it was sometimes you get a bit ahead of yourself, but some of these photos can inspire you to keep going. So I think that sort of serves some of a purpose. This is this point where I'm still having this problem that it's the oil is overflowing over the top, and a big reason of this is that if I'd leave the oil lamp somewhere and the sun would hit it, then the oil would heat up and it would become sort of thinner, but also it would expand a bit. And because the oil's already so close to the tip, it was really easy for it to just sort of flow down and start pooling there. And then as it starts pooling, it's obviously getting a little bit heavier, and then that's definitely not going to help the situation of having oil overflowing. So I started thinking, yeah, about other designs. This was sort of a terrible one. I don't think the idea was to have a floating wick here with a flame, but it looked so bad that I think I destroyed it shortly after taking this photo. But because this problem seemed to be occurring quite a lot, if I left it in the sun or something, I thought, well, if it's not being used, you can tighten one of these knobs. I'm just playing with some designs. Tighten the knob so the RAM can't sink down anymore, and if you move it, it's nothing's going to happen. But because even if the RAM is staying there and this warms up, the volume of the oil is still going to get more, so it's going to tip oil out the top. So that was just also denkfehler. But I'm still playing it at ways to try and stop the RAM from going down, and still having these problems here. One of the one of the issues with this O-ring was when I was using paraffin oil, I'd have to use a different rubber to with the olive oil. The olive oil wouldn't react with the seal, and it would stay the same and work quite well as a seal. But if I was using paraffin oil, then I'd have to change my rubber, and then the rubber wasn't nearly as elastic. So I would sort of make a lamp and it would work really well for a day, but then 2 days later the rubber would relax a little bit, the resistance would sort of become less, and then it would start pushing more oil over the top. So sort of the olive oil and the paraffin oil had their own sort of tricky problems to try and deal with. So to try and make things a little bit easier, I decided to move to aluminium that's more dimensionally stable throughout the length of the travel. And that did work a lot better, and that meant that I could keep this tube like exactly one length, and I didn't have to have fiddly little pull out pieces and stuff. But and I tried to sort of make it as nice as possible with ways to be able to this had a thread going in here with a screw to be able to lock the RAM. And I think at this point I was thinking, well, like if a little bit of oil flows over and because it gets too warm, then so be it. But yeah, the whole time I was still thinking of somehow trying to incorporate a better constant level mechanism, something where like an airport would be closed or something, and then or an airlock would be formed. But yeah, and then I sort of he's this old, so time's passing. And then I had this idea of having this having a reservoir with oil, and then having a bath, and this is like vented to atmosphere, and as the oil fills the bath, once the oil hits the rim of the reservoir, then it creates an airlock, and no more oil can come through, and the oil level will stay at exactly the same time the whole time. Once the oil's burnt here, this level is also immediately getting affected. So as the oil's burnt, and it sort of reduces a little bit, it's going to create a little air pocket and a little bubble, and it's just going to quickly fill that back and create another airlock. So I glued this together with hot glue, and it worked beautifully until this got too hot and sort of melted a bit, but it worked great straight away. So I was on to new and better things. So I had a little bit of a play, and I just used a straight brass tube, and I think I put even a metal block on the bottom, so the bottom, it was a bit more bottom heavy. But the issue with this design was, I had a screw at the top with an O-ring, and I wanted to make it so you could just fill it from the top. But what was quite difficult was to fill it, because once you take the screw out, then obviously you don't have this airlock anymore. So around here I've got a little spout, and this is the bath, You're removing this airlock, so then all the oil wants to go gushing out. So you'd have to put your finger on top of the the arm here, so the oil couldn't go through there, and then there was a vent hole here, and you'd have to plug that hole as well, and then you could fill it up, and it was really fiddly. I tried to make a vent hole that was a pipe that sort of traveled all the way down into just above where the bath is, but then that would sort of get touched with oil, and the surface tension would sort of block that vent, and then you would create sort of a little vacuum in there that then it wouldn't burn properly. So that was a bit of a problem, and so then I move out of the small cellar again. I decided I want more room, and I'm doing my Meister, so I'm probably early in this studies, and I'm maybe I can use this my old workshop to build bigger things. So I do some sort of form studies, pretty just having a bit of a play to see what looks good. I was pretty happy with that other design, but at the same time I felt okay, well, let's give it a little bit of a thought before I just sort of stick with the first design that I get. And I also decide it's quite a lot easier to design something 3D and then sort of just cut and paste it and change some things and see what it looks like. And so I did that quite a bit to see if something sort of jumped out at me, and I decided to make this one. I kind of liked it, but this was very high. This was sort of, I don't know, 50 centimeters or something, and I felt your sort of eyes are about here when you're sitting at a table, and it was quite disturbing for your line of sight. It sort of seemed to block your line of sight. So anyway, I decided not to continue with that one. And then decided this is where this idea of separating the reservoir and the bath sort of came in, and then I would have a little spout here, and that was sort of where you can sort of pull this part out and pull this part out. That was where this comes along, and that means that everything can just be soldered. There's no O-rings, and you can pull the reservoir out, fill it, and put it back in, and you don't have to plug any holes, you don't have to fiddle around, you don't have to take a wick out. It's just pull it out, fill it up, push it back in, and it keeps going. So once I sort of developed this idea, that sort of was a good kickstart. And also I was trying to think about incorporating something with all this metal, and I saw an oyster shell lying around that my wife picked up where we, once a year go and eat some oysters, and she brought them home, and I looked at them, and I think our kids, played with them for, years now, and they're half broken, and I whacked it on and it looked great. And, this natural luminescence from the oyster shell is like really nice at night, So, that was basically, getting there, and I added like a little foot for stability so I could get rid of this metal block for weight, but I think it also creates a more stable appearance, which is pleasing. So I took some nice photos. He's this old now, getting bigger, and I think when I'm getting towards the end of my Meister course, I realize just how incredibly involved it is trying to start a business where you offer many services to people, and doing contracts with people, sort of, it's a huge task, and also then following all the legal requirements that you have to do. So I thought, let's sell all my big tools and make a tiny workshop and focus on making just one thing. So this is tiny workshops getting made, which is nice. And I also thought, we spend so much time working, it makes sense to make like a really beautiful workshop. Like, instead of these workshops that just look rubbish, I thought, like, let's make an aesthetically pleasing workshop. And then every time I go to work, I'm going to, really enjoy working there. And also that, it's also going to be a great thing that I can, document my work on, and photograph the lamp and parts of the lamp. So I thought, it's sort of many little, it ticked many boxes. So I go on holidays and I start thinking, all I could do is work, or sort of do some little squiggles on the, digitally. So one of the issues that I had with this 90-degree piece is that I could only feed the wick this far in, and I couldn't feed it around the bend, or at least it was very difficult to try and get it around the bend. So I put this angle on there, and and now I can feed the wick all the way in here, and I can sort of coil it up and have a lot of extra wick waiting there, so you don't have to change the wick very often. So it's easier to feed in, but I can also hold more wick, so that's a win-win. And I'm thinking about making a clear piece here, so I can see how much oil's left, and that was sort of important for regulations. I'm not sure if they're applicable, but there's one regulation with candles that, like, if the candle goes out, it can't burn for more than sort of, I don't know, 10 or 20 seconds or something, or it can't smoke for more than 10 or 20 seconds. I'm not sure if that's sort of, what the purpose is. They just sort of say it shouldn't do this, but they don't say, like, because maybe it emits, paraffin wax might emit, some kind of, like, undesirable chemicals when it's smoking or something. But I thought, I wanted to sort of tick that box anyway, so I'm sort of playing with some more designs here. And playing a little bit more with how this might look with two, and getting my dimensions set here, so when I get back I know exactly how long I need to make all my pieces. Having another play with some colors as well, about I'm not really sure what I wanted to offer. And then we come back from holidays, and get building, and this is this little printed piece. It was going to be clear, but this was just a test, so I made it gray. And things started getting a little bit complicated. I had to print it, and the materials were quite expensive, but also it's a plastic that's not UV resistant, so it would have to be coated with something that's UV resistant. But then I also thought, how well is that going to fare over time? And I really like the idea of the lamp being kind of indestructible, and that, it could be on a flea market in 50 years time and still work is just as good as the day you bought it. So that sort of started to sort of work away from what I wanted, and then it sort of made me also a little bit more dependent on having access to a really good 3D printer. So instead of having a bit of a looking glass, which this was meant to be, I ended up inserting like a bell which just hangs here and a little ball. And when you wobble it, if there's fluid in the chamber, it won't be able to make a ding because the fluid will slow it down. But if it's empty, it'll sort of give a nice ring, and then it's sort of nearly empty. And then that was sort of meant to tick that regulations sort of box of being able to notice if it was empty, so you wouldn't have a smoking wick. Yeah, so I've inserted brass because I don't need that printed piece anymore, and took some more photos, and then started to do a little bit of color matching and seeing what kind of surface finish I wanted to apply. One of the issues is this piece is sort of not that easy to polish because of the arm and this here. That's actually quite time consuming to polish that little piece myself. And to avoid that, or to at least have an option of not having to do that, I wanted to find some kind of surface finish that, that was quick and also, looked really good. So I'm having a bit of a play around. This is sort of like an acidic solution that that I put this piece into. I didn't clean it well, so it didn't sort of come out really well, but it still kind of looked nice. This is the same solution, but with a polished surface instead of a sanded surface to start with. And then I spray paint one black over here, and looks really nice. And this one is sort of with the chemicals of soldering, or the soldering paste. I rubbed it on and heated it up with a heat gun, and it sort of brings out some copper on the surface. So this is sort of like a very light copper plating or coating here, which and on a sandblasted sort of surface. So that also looks quite nice. So I think this black's what I'm going to go for, and this is actually I've just talked to a company, and what I want to get is this. I want to get this zinc plated, and then you can get a black passivation is what it's called, and it's dipped in another chemical and it comes out black. So it's not going to be completely sort of like spray painted even, but it's going to have some sort of marks. But it'll be a much better and long lasting coat than paint could ever be, because it's electrically plated. And yeah, this guy's this big, so a lot of time has passed. And we're at the tiny factory. I'm sort of laying things out, and I'm getting close to, to being able to order some materials to make the first round. And I made here on this day a little bit of a tiny workshop tour and talked about some of my tools. And here editing the video. So yeah, I mean, I think that's about like where we are today with this, and I think I left out probably quite a few different iterations of the lamp, and I hope I sort of explained it in a way that sort of made some kind of sense. If there was something that I wanted to say about prototyping is, I think the first thing you have to do is have a workshop. If you don't have that, you can't do anything, but also, Yeah, you have. I mean, I think you have to expect that it's going to take a long time, and you also have to think about like how something's going to be manufactured in the end. Like there was a point where, I thought about getting some parts sort of made in China, but that was really not really something that I wanted to do. So then the idea of getting it made in Europe probably came across too expensive. So I had to think about, a certain design that I would be able to make with a certain, relatively inexpensive tools. And I think that's one thing that, you have to sort of always keep in mind when you're designing something is like how are you going to make it, and there can be very very minor changes in designs that can have a huge impact on how difficult something is to make. So the whole time it's sort of you have to sort of have this balance of manufacture and form. And and I mean, you're going to make sure you do something that you like. Otherwise, you're sort of not really going to be able to make it through this phase of getting something at the end. Like I think back years ago in Australia, I tried to start a business it was like an online property management tool for like real estate rentals to document everything. And then I thought like, do I even like this? It was like, all I wanted to do was solve a problem. And then so I let go of that, and this seems to fit a lot more for who I am, and I really enjoy doing doing this project, and I really just look forward to making some oil lamps. So yeah. But I think you also have to be a little bit, you have to be a little bit crazy, and you don't expect things to happen, too quickly. But then again, I mean, if you have more time than I've had, then things can happen a bit quicker. Obviously, I take my time. Anyway, I think that's about it for now, and yeah, thanks for listening if you made it this far.